When I was casting the role of Thornton, my initial reaction was shock. It'd been a long casting process, and I realised it was the role of a lifetime. But then, of course, I was incredibly honoured to have been asked to play it. I'd fallen in love with the novel. And then other emotions kick in, like fear. It was a huge mountain to climb, so you kind of have, and there's a lot of expectation for that role as well. It's a big favourite of many people, so that was the next stage to get through before the read-through. Research obviously started with the novel, and the novel was around all the time, and there's a great deal of rich kind of historical information in the novel, but I felt it was important to understand the industry that Thornton is in. So I researched the cotton industry, and I went to the various places in England where there's working museums, one of which turned out to be one of the locations, which was brilliant. I also read, there's quite a lot of, I think Engels has written a book which was based around the sort of working classes in the 1850s, which is incredibly sort of detailed about the poverty. So I looked at that for a start, and then read around the sort of the etiquette of the 1850s as well. Although the Thorntons don't necessarily abide by those rules, I felt it was important to know as much about the period as possible. But primarily, it's the novel that is the point of reference. I've read the book before I went in to be cast. I got through it as quickly as I could. I felt it was that I owed it to the role to know as much about it before I attempted to try and convince someone to cast me as Thornton. I thought it was important that I knew that character. But the novel was there all the time for me. Sandy's script obviously is the first thing and the last thing that you abide by, but the novel was around all the time, and it's a great point of reference all the time we're filming. The costumes are really, really important. Mike and his team did an amazing job, as did Alison, who worked with the hair and the kind of basic look of the characters. When you get into costume before the day starts, if they feel like costumes, then the creation of your character for that day is kind of marred in some way. So it was really important, the details, that my costumes were quite heavy fabrics, and they were kind of flawed. There was a big patch on the knee which was darned, and so that gives your character a sort of it gives your costume a biography, as it were. And the kind of stiff starched collars and cravat, it's a very useful tool which can then be deconstructed. I think there's a scene where the cravat came off as a necessary moment. And things like the pocket watch was quite an old, beautiful piece of jewellery, and I decided that it belonged to Thornton's father, so that he was kind of wearing something of his father all the time. So in that respect, your costume becomes clothing rather than costume. So yeah, it's really, really important. I do think that this marks a different sort of costume drama. I think that the style of shooting and the style of playing is very contemporary. Even though every department was honouring the accuracy and tradition of the 1850s, it wasn't the aim to make it a documentary or a museum type piece. So although everyone was attempting to be as accurate as possible, I think that if you look at the way that people look and the way that the camera works, it works like almost like another character. So you get very close to the action, and there's a sort of motion with the photography which we're very used to when we watch contemporary drama, and traditionally I think with period drama it tends to be more static. So in that respect, I think yes. And also the playing, the style of playing, the acting was the leaning was towards making it as contemporary as possible, so that it resonated with a contemporary audience rather than alienating. So I think being compared to Darcy is a huge compliment. That was a defining role for Colin Firth, and it's memorable, and it's survived for many years, and it's memorable to me. So to be compared to him is a huge compliment. I don't think there are too many similarities. I think that the temperament of this character is similar, and the nature of their relationship, Margaret and John. But yeah, I'm quite happy to be compared to Darcy. The role of Thornton doesn't really compare to anything else I've done before. That's not to dismiss my other work, but I think it was the greatest challenge I've ever had. It was the role of a lifetime, I believe. The kind of the amount of information in that book, and the way that character was loved by so many people. He's lived on the page for 150 years, so that's a great challenge for a start. But I think in me there's a natural affinity because of my heritage towards this character. So there were many aspects to which I related. And I kind of fell in love with the book. The locations are really important, and the design team, every time we arrived on set in the morning, most of us were floored with what we saw, because they created this amazing world. We shot in Edinburgh to start off with this amazing grand architecture. But a really important moment for me was when we arrived in Keighley, which was about 3 weeks into filming, and I finally saw the mill, and this is his empire, and it had a profound effect on me, which I wasn't actually aware of it at the time, but it really I kind of grew about 2 inches, I think. So that was a very important moment for me, and proof that the location has an enormous effect on the character. I've got 3 favourite moments. Watching the piece visually, my favourite moment, I think, is the scene where she leaves in the carriage. They filled the mill courtyard with snow, and there's the solitary carriage in the middle, and Margaret gets into the carriage to leave, and to act that was not difficult, because I felt the sense of loss of her leaving, so that was a very important moment. I think the proposal scene, purely because I think it's one of the longest scenes to play, but it was the opportunity for both of us to really, stretch our kind of acting legs, and that was a very satisfying scene to film. And then I think the final scene at the station, the climax of the piece, was that was a very nice way to spend an afternoon. A funny moment during the filming was the scene when during the riot scene when Margaret has to get hit with a stone. So the art department had very brilliantly made a rubber brick, which was the size of a boulder. And they started to sort of rehearse the scene, and someone pointed out that if that actually was going to be thrown at her head would probably come off. So they had to sort of reduce the size of this brick to like a little sort of rubber stone, obviously, because you can't throw stones at people. And the grip was the guy that had been put in charge of aiming and trying to hit her. So throughout, they'd done it on handheld, so there's the Steve kind of really trying to capture it with a lot of motion, and you got the grip kind of aiming to try and hit Daniela on the head. It took about 10 takes. It hit me in the face, but every time the stone sort of flew, Daniela dropped to the ground, regardless of whether it hit her or not. And obviously everyone keeps going, and there were quite a few takes where I kind of went down to see if she's okay, and she's lying on the floor, absolutely in hysterics, with laughter because this rubber brick had sort of bounced off her nose. But yeah, that was a very funny moment, and the horse poo as well was quite funny. So working with Daniela, Sinead, Tim, Brendan was obviously a phenomenal experience for me. There's the three characters that I realised contributed to the 3/4 of Thornton's character was Margaret, Sinead, and Hannah, and Higgins, and working with those actors really gave me my character, and I think Brian created such an easy working atmosphere and a good democracy with the cast and crew that everyone felt very liberated and free and inspired on a daily basis. So I made a lot of acting breakthroughs for myself because of Daniela, Sinead, Tim, Brendan, and it's kind of redefined my needs as an actor, and my kind of goalposts have moved now. So I guess I'm going to judge everything according to what happened with North and South.